Welcome to another CHRO Conversation, hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Melissa Anderson. Melissa is the Senior Vice President and CHRO of Albemarle Corporation, a global specialty chemicals company. Prior to this position, Melissa was the Executive Vice President and CHRO of Duke Energy. Duke is a Fortune 500 company and is the largest energy holding company in the United States. Melissa is also the board chair of SHRM and serves on the board of Vulcan Materials Company.
Melissa, thank you very much for joining us. We sincerely appreciate having you here in Columbia.
Thank you so much for having me, Anthony. It's always a pleasure to be here.
So you recently changed companies, or now it's been a little more than a year, right? Can you share a little bit about what some of the first things you do when you join a new company, particularly at a CHRO role? Great
question. The first thing I always do is listen and learn. That's probably the most important thing you need to do when you join a company. It's so tempting to want to jump in and apply all the lessons you've learned prior in your career. But what I found to be most effective is to spend a lot of time with your colleagues, with your own team, and getting out into the business and really understanding the culture, understanding where people are happy with the services that are provided by your team, really understanding the vision of the company, where it needs to go, and how your team fits into that, and what you can do to help accelerate the company's performance and execution of the strategy, and then what do you need to do differently, and then bringing that back to your team. Because I find a lot of times when you've been in a job a little while, you think you know. And so the one advantage that you have when you're coming in new is that you don't know, and you go out and you look, and I think that's just listening and then working with your team to see that your team's going to tell you how best to implement the changes that you need to implement, but I would say listening's the number one.
And was this, you actually talked about going out and seeing people. Was this then much harder during age of COVID, during when it was harder to go actually see people in person?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Most of my listening tour has had to be a virtual listening tour. I've been able to go out a little bit, primarily in the US. But ordinarily, my first year, I usually call it my road warrior year, because it's where I go out to all of the plants and the facilities and get to meet the HR team, the leadership team, the frontline supervisors, and really understand how we make money and what we need to do better and differently. And I will tell you this, in all the years that I've been doing this, I almost always come back recommitted to making better first-line supervisors.
What is it that you often see when you go out there that brings you back to saying, let me work on the first-line supervisors as a starting point or as an early point of emphasis?
It's what research shows us over and over again, which is people rarely leave companies. They leave because of their manager, their frontline supervisor. And now during the pandemic, more than ever, having someone that actually cares about you, who can create the right balance between what the company needs and what the individual needs to be healthy and successful, being able to create that key balance is so important now more than ever. And so, I've always thought it's important. But research time and time again, and including the most recent studies, will tell you that making sure you have really good frontline supervisors who are able to coach and develop and communicate very effectively with their employees is so important.
And you talked about them caring. So it's not really the stereotypical idea that I have, at least, of many frontline managers, particularly in manufacturing, that I would think of them as being really highly empathetic. So how does one go about helping train managers to have more of that part, particularly in an environment that is, again, like a manufacturing environment?
I think there's lots of ways that you go about it, but probably one of the most effective is, sitting down with them to understand, to have sessions where they're in touch with the things that frustrate them, and they have effective tools for being heard and getting the voices of their employees heard, because a lot of times that frontline supervisor becomes the inflection point. They've got a lot of people making demands on them, and then they're having to translate those demands to their employees, but it's really creating an environment where they're being coached and they have a way to drive change that positively affects their employees. And then just working with them so that they have the skills and the opportunity to process what they're going through.
So really helping teach them to be better listeners and better aware to help their people by not pointing out that what they need to do better, but rather by helping listen to them more and helping understand their position more. Is that what I heard?
That's better said. Yes, that's exactly right. It's really by enabling them and their success, and giving them the airtime and the skills to process, what they need to be successful. Because a lot of times that frontline supervisor doesn't know that they're frustrated.
And one of the things you mentioned when you're first heading out on your Road Warrior tour was understanding the culture. So how do you get a good grasp of what the culture of the organization is in a time, again, when you're doing so many things virtually?
Probably the best thing that you can do is do skip levels with people within your function and in other functions. So I reach out, 3 and 4 levels below my peers' direct reports, and just ask them what's going well, what's not going well. How do they like working there? What would they change if they were sitting in my shoes? Those are the types of questions that I ask them, and I try to go much broader than my team.
So I presume one of the things as you enter a new company is thinking about how the culture should it's particularly for strong companies, it's already there and it's good, but maybe it needs to be nudged a little ways. If so, how quickly can you start doing something like that, and what are kind of early steps in helping move a culture even a little bit in a direction that you're trying to nudge it?
Number one, it depends on how diverse the culture is, because within a lot of companies there are subcultures. But it's really making sure that you have the support of your peers on the senior leadership team, and that you feel certain that where you see an opportunity to move the culture, that they're aligned, they see the opportunity the same way, and when you're looking at other things that you need to implement, you feel like you're going to have the energy and the time commitment to do it, because to move the culture, about the time that you're tired of talking about it, that's when people are first at the frontline employee level. That's when they're really starting to hear and understand what you're talking about. And so I always tell CEOs that I support, unless you have a 5-year commitment, don't go on that journey, because it's going to feel like flavor of the month to an employee, and it's not going to be worth the time and the effort that you put into it. So it's really understanding, what you're trying to do from a cultural standpoint, what are the benefits, and then making sure that your peers are willing to take that 3 to 5 year journey.
So that's really 5 years. That's an amazing number. I don't think I've thought about it being really that long to really make these lasting changes. So that's why it requires getting the full leadership team really on board, I suppose.
And I will tell you that the company that I'm at today, they put in values 4 years ago, and it is the glue of the company. And when we're recruiting people and they're interviewing, whether they're interviewing in China or Chile, they have a very similar experience, and what they hear about the company and why people like working there is very similar, because of the values that really underpin the culture of the company.
And in thinking about COVID and some of the changes that have occurred, in part because of having to work remotely, et cetera, what are some of the things that you've noticed that's really changing from the HR function, maybe just in COVID, or maybe that might be more long-lasting?
I would say one of the biggest benefits of COVID is the fact that HR can have a bolder seat at the table. I've always worked at companies where HR has a seat at the table and is part of the business strategy and and they're the primary architect of the employee experience. But what I will tell you is that they can be more pronounced and more definitive about how important creating great employee experiences are to the benefit of the company. And I think that's a great outcome.
So I love that imagery, right? That we've moved past having a seat at the table to having a bolder seat at the table. Right. That's really cool. You should coin that phrase. Go out and trademark it right now. Are there other lessons that we should be taking from the pandemic and how we engage with employees throughout the organization?
I think there's one really important lesson, which is that people want to be seen and valued. And that doesn't just include when they have leverage. So I think today employees feel like they have more leverage than ever before because of the Great Resignation. But I think that doesn't go away if and when the balance of employer needs is greater than, is no longer greater than the number of employees available. And so I think, if employers take with them the need to listen to and value and create great employee experiences, just like they create great customer experiences, that's the one lesson that I think employers should take away with them.
And you mentioned the Great Resignation. So kind of first, is that true? Is there really a Great Resignation going on? There's a lot of mixed things we hear in the media about it. And if it is true, what's really driving it, do you think?
Well, I definitely think it's true. The numbers bear it out. I would say what's driving it is probably two primary variables. One is people had time. They took a pause in their life and they had time to think about what was important to them. And in many cases, they felt like what was important to them wasn't important to their employer. And I think number two is that it became easier. And I think that for someone to leave an employer. So I think when you're physically in the same space with people, there's a level of connection that's different than when you're working remote. You can create that same level of connection, but it takes a lot of effort, and a lot of managers or leaders aren't adept at doing that. So I think it became easier for people to decide to pick up and leave. And it also became easier to interview. So you weren't physically leaving a workplace and interviews were being done virtually.
So if there is this Great Resignation going on, and we've described how easy it is for employees to really switch companies, what can companies do to try to make sure that they're keeping their best talent?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked me that question, because the one thing I have been talking about at SHRM is this is the day we need to reconnect. We need to reconnect with our employees and really make them feel valued and appreciated and understood. So I think when that happens, employees will stay over and over again, and they won't go out chasing money.
So what does that mean kind of for the future of the workplace? How do you create an environment where you're really connecting that way with employees?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with conversations. It is, again, going back to the listening and really having conversations that matter, talking to employees about what matters to them. And, this is where we've seen a big convergence between what's happening outside of work and what's happening in the workplace. And managers need to make room and space for understanding, what an employee is dealing with day to day, and helping support them the best ways that they can. All
of our conversations in the country now seem to be really polarized, and this is certainly true in the workplace too, whether it's about required vaccinations or working from remotely, et cetera. How can organizations, or how should organizations navigate this when almost any decision you make, half will be happy with you and half will be angry? I think it's so important that we get to a place where we can have constructive discourse and do it in a really respectful manner. And that seems harder now than ever before. And what we've been trying to do, and I think the only path forward,
is to model conversations where you show respect and appreciation for a different point of view. And that's part of what we're trying to do with managers and leaders, and that is create opportunities for conversations about why to wear a mask, why to be vaccinated, and to be really open and transparent about what our view of science is, what our view of what's in the best interest of our employees' health and safety, and really bring it back to our values as a company. And I think employers have to stand in a place where they can honestly tell employees, we can appreciate a different point of view, but because we believe a certain set of facts, that might mean that we might not be the employer that you want to stay with. And I think that's where a lot of employers are at this moment in time.
Wow, so this would also contribute to this great resignation as employees sort themselves into companies that they feel like they fit with more. And it's okay for organizations to do that, to make those kind of stands?
It's a really important point because right now, for the first time in the history of our country, employees trust their employers more than they trust many government agencies. So I think for many employers, being really transparent about why they're making decisions, and then walking employees through, the impact that it may or may not have on that employee is really important. And yes, if at the end of the day it means an employee makes a decision, but I will tell you that happens less than you think it does. There's a lot of hyperbole and a lot of vitriolic conversations, but what I've seen is that if it's met with really calm, factual responses, not reactions, but responses, those individuals can and do turn.
And so organizations really have an opportunity, or maybe a responsibility now, with transparency, to be the leading voice for helping create a richer, more respectful conversation in the country. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I believe so, yes. I absolutely believe that. And I think it's needed now more than ever.
So if that's true, companies are going to be our great savior from kind of the quagmire that we're in, that it's the CHROs that are really going to be helping drive that understanding of the need for transparency and the rich conversations.
Well, my hope is that we'll be one of many voices, and I hope that there will be other people joining in the arena, but I think we're an important voice, and I think that we've proven time and time again that we can help companies create that right balance between what's a healthy work environment and healthy for the employee both in and outside of work, and help create great value and health for whatever society we're operating in.
I like that you just led me all the way down the path to get to the place where the CHRO is going to be the savior of the whole country. So you are also currently the board chair for SHRM, Strategic Human Resource Management Society. Can you share a little bit about why everyone should be members of SHRM and what greatness that SHRM can help do?
Oh, absolutely. I think SHRM is an amazing resource for any HR professional. Not only are they the conveners on policy and making sure that all different types of employers' voices are heard, because there's so many policies that impact businesses' viability and employees' health and well-being, to providing administrative tools or helping. They were on the front lines with us during the early days of the pandemic, bringing the CDC to the HR profession, helping the HR professionals know what they could or couldn't do and how to navigate through some very uncertain times. But it's also a great place for CHROs to meet and convene with one another and problem solve together. So, it's not only a great resource, but it's a great collaboration tool. And it's done a lot for the profession in terms of helping the profession create skill development and standards so that when you're ready for the next move in your career.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I now need to get you down to speak to our students So again, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You just listened to another CHRO conversation. Today, Melissa Anderson shared her views regarding the role of HR in driving business success. She also shared ideas for how HR drives company culture to help advance company success while helping to improve customer experiences. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.